Following the release of last week's first look of New World, I spoke with editor-in-chief of MMOBomb.com, Mike Byrne, and told him that I would like to do a follow-up video where I talk about, some things that I would like to see changed or added to New World over time. He said that would be fine, but he would like it to be an MMO Thoughts video. And as such, I would need to be on camera more, and I needed to make it a little more classy than my usual content. So I decided to scour the website of Classy, YouTube.com, and find the classiest man that I could, and then steal his gimmick in its entirety. Ladies and gentlemen, hello and welcome. I am Troy, Noobfridge Blackburn, and today I want to talk about 10 things that New World should change as soon as possible. I know it may be difficult to maintain focus with the mountain of pure sexy that is currently on your screen, but we're here to talk about New World and the things that I believe the game developers should do to improve the game going forward. These things should improve the longevity of the game overall, as well as the current enjoyment players are getting from the game. So let's kick off with 2 things that I believe New World needs to address immediately. All right, I'm not really going to do this in like a countdown or a top 10 list. We're just going to start with 1 and go through 10. And it's hard for me to start a video like this without talking about one of the most annoying things in the game at the moment for me personally, and that's aggro radius and leash distance of mobs. That's right. You can walk into a camp and try to get that one-on-one fight with that enemy mob, but just know that 4 of his friends are going to be coming along for the party at all times. They seem to have a former Guild Wars 2 developer on the staff at this rate, the size of aggro radiuses for mobs in this game. They're all jam-packed into small areas, their aggro radiuses overlap, and it's almost impossible to control the pull that you want to make unless you're using a ranged weapon to try to get aggro on things initially. And even then, sometimes things will just come flying out of nowhere because another player aggroes something. It'll just leave them and come running at you for no reason whatsoever. Going along with that, of course, is leash distance. If I accidentally aggro something running down the road, should it follow me into the next map zone? Because it has before. Leash distance is entirely too long in this game. Things should fall off a little quicker than what they do. And there's no reason a level 9 wolf should be aggroing on my level 50 character from half a mile away at this point in the game. Following that is an issue that I've been seeing quite often, and I have seen brought up by others. And it seems to be, at least right now, maybe a shortcoming of the game engine itself. I know going into the development of New World, some of the other previous failures from Amazon Game Studios, a lot of folks were starting to say, hey, is it the Lumberyard game engine that's the problem here? Well, this game has really nice verticality. There are buildings that you can walk into, 2-3-story houses you can walk into, giant towers you can climb, bridges over giant valleys, hills, mountains, lots of verticality in the game. However, the game engine itself doesn't seem to be able to recognize hardly any of this. You can be in the 2nd story of a house and be fighting a mob. If you use any type of AoE ability, you're going to aggro the things above you and below you, and they're all going to come running up towards you, much like the aggro radius problem we just talked about. On the side of hills, a lot of people have had complaints that you're sort of 50-50 hit or miss. It doesn't matter where you're aiming, what weapon you're using. It's very easy to just miss attacks because the game engine doesn't seem to understand that you're on 2 different levels, or thinks you're on another level, and since you're aiming up, you're aiming above the other player's head. Who knows what's going on behind the scenes? I'm not a game developer, but the elevation is an issue in the game and really needs to be addressed really quickly in order for balance in the game. Moving on, let's talk about 3 things that I believe should be added to New World to help improve the player experience. As you can see, I've surrounded myself with items that provide you my nerd credentials, so you know that I am also a nerd. Lots of things in my life are nerd things. So let's talk about quality of life improvements that could be made in New World. So, kicking off my list of 3 quality of life improvements that I think could make a huge difference in New World, we're going to start with adding the ability to control what you're tracking on your compass. When you first start the game, it's not going to be too bad, and even those first couple of times where you get to start tracking materials or small prey animals, it's really convenient. It's really nice to see those, especially when you're getting town board quests to go out and collect these things. As you continue to level up and improve, though, more and more things keep getting added to that compass. And before you know it, you can't turn without seeing a million things slide across the compass screen while you're looking in different directions. What would be really useful is in the game settings, just a series of checkboxes to track or untrack each individual thing that the compass tracks. That way I can decide what do I want to see on there right now, what do I not need to see right now, but can add back later if I want to. The next quality of life improvement I would like to see is a little bit based on my personal experience, I will have to admit, but this is my list, it's my experience. These are the things that I would like to see changed in New World. And that would be some sort of company stash. I've seen other people talk about like a mail system, but given the way that they've broken out, you have to store things individually at each village. You have to use their marketplace. They're all broken up individual. Being able to mail something across the continent within a couple of minutes doesn't make a lot of sense. What would be super awesome is each town has a very small company stash where I can leave things that I want to give to other players who aren't online right now. I play a lot with friends, real life people I know, and we are like, hey man, I'm out of iron ore. Does anybody have any? Or hey man, I could use some steel pickaxes. Does anybody have any? I would love to, if we're not online at the same time, just leave that in the stash at Monarch's Bluff or wherever so they can just swing by and pick it up at their earliest convenience. That would be great, and I would enjoy it immensely. And finally, there are story quests and side quests in New World, but they're not overly abundant. The majority of what you're going to be doing is faction boards and town board quests, and they get very repetitive and very grindy after a while. Occasionally, there are some side quests to find out in the world as you explore. And some of these have a little more story to them, and some of them get a little bit interesting as you kind of follow the little thread of the story going along. They're not big, overarching masterpieces of storytelling, but it's at least a reason to do what you're doing besides, grind XP. I'd like to see more of those added out in the world. I would like to be able to find those, discover those as I'm exploring the world. I've got lots of reasons to be out in the world. That would be yet another thing for me able to run across, find that I wasn't expecting when I'm out and about. Next up, I would like to talk about a couple of issues that are going to be a very big deal here in the next week or so. Server transfers have been currently delayed for an unknown period of time, but they are coming, with free transfers being promised to players. Let's talk about some serious issues that could arise. Serious questions like, is there anything in this cup? So let's start out talking about the huge elephant in the room, and that is the fact that when free server transfers were announced by Amazon Game Studios, they very specifically stated that folks would be able to transfer between server regions when these free transfers went live. Unfortunately, they have gone back on their word as far as the latest that we have from them, stating that now region swapping will not be available with these free server transfers. That is unfortunate for those players who fell into the trap that Amazon Game Studios themselves created by rolling out the game hours apart in different parts of the world. European servers launched first, and a lot of folks who were nervous about losing their name or their guild name to the worldwide name lock rolled on a European server to secure their name. Even more so is when East Coast USA went live, West Coasters were a couple of hours away from playing the game at that point. So a lot of West Coasters jumped on the East Coast servers, creating part of the queue problem that we've been experiencing the last couple of weeks, although it does seem to have been mostly resolved at this point for many servers. But those folks jumped on and just started playing because it was going to be hours before they could play, due to Amazon Game Studios' choices on how they were going to roll the game out. So once it was announced that free server transfers would be coming and that you could transfer cross regions, a lot of folks just committed to the server they were on and put a lot of time and effort into their character. Only to recently have Amazon step back on that and say, no, we're not going to do that anymore. You're not going to be able to transfer regions any longer. Amazon, please give us back the ability to swap regions when free server transfers go live. A lot of folks need that. A lot of folks took you at your word saying that you would be able to transfer anywhere you wanted to go, that just, settle in for now. Well, we'll take care of it soon. Everybody can figure out where you want to go and play with your friends. You promised a lot of folks they could do that, and now you've taken that away, and they're going to have to start over, or more likely, they're just going to walk away from the game, depending on how many hours they already have committed. Just let folks transfer between regions. It only makes sense, and it's something that you said you were going to do. The other huge issue with character transfers that are going to be coming up is server balance on servers where folks are leaving and where folks are coming. Now, you can look on the server status page and see servers that are full, and if they're currently considered quote-unquote full, you're not going to be able to transfer to those servers, period. You have to choose a server that's not labeled as full. But a lot of these servers, unless you're going to spend the time to create a character on lots of different servers just to see what the faction balance is like, what the player base is like, is it more PvP leaning server, is it a more PvE leaning server, is one faction just completely dominating? If you're in a large guild and you want to move, are you going to completely unbalance the server unintentionally when you move? Or if you and a bunch of marauders come onto a fairly well-balanced server, would you throw that into imbalance for the marauders, not intending to? It's hard to tell that right now. It's really hard something to know, and it's something that could cause a lot of chaos going into server transfers. So what Amazon Game Studios needs to do is incentivize us, those of us who need to transfer, probably like myself at this point, to go to servers who need players, play in factions that need players. Yeah, they can shut down like the biggest faction on a server, but you need to let me know before I choose the server. Hey, Marauders could really use some help on this server. Syndicate is, a little behind on this server. If you join that, you could really make a big difference in helping them sort of balance out the server. Some information like that would be really great, or at least provide us a place to openly have this information, to look at it and help us decide where we want to go, because you're going to have even worse situations. Like the server I'm currently on is dominated by Covenant. It's dominated by a big streamer with a fairly good sized following, and the only syndicate guilds that ever took territories left within the first 2 days of launch because of the queue times caused by the streamer and his big following. And the other faction, the Marauders, just took their first territory in the history of the server yesterday. Their first territory ever in over a week of launch. First one yesterday. We really need to have information and incentivize players to go places and join factions that can help the longevity of the server, not just jump willy-nilly into whatever situation and still be in the same situation you are now, where you're like, this isn't what I wanted. So, spoiler alert, this cup is empty and pointless, much like my life. And now we're going to talk about some things that I would like to see added to the game that I think would improve the experience in the long term. Although I do think that they should add them as soon as they can. Just like I should find something to put in this cup and in my life as soon as I can. So let's start with the super obvious. More dungeons, please. Now, I've heard from several different sources that Amazon Game Studios has something like 6 more dungeons in the works that we're supposed to get even before we get a new zone. So there's definitely dungeon content being cranked out. As far as the life of the game overall, dungeons are very, very new to the game. They've only recently been added, and so there's some shortcuts taken here and there, and that's one of the other things I want to talk about is let's add some unique bosses to some of these raids. There are some mechanics and other elements of the different to differentiate different fights within these dungeons. But so many of the bosses are just very large versions of things that you fight out in the world that it kind of takes away from the awesomeness that is walking in and seeing a big bad boss for the first time. So let's go in and update some character models. Let's get a couple, at least the last boss of the dungeon, the final boss of the very first dungeon. Let's not have him be a large version of something that you find out in the world. Speaking of things out in the world, I think elite zones and the corruption breaches could be great. They could be next level content. The corruption breaches right now are fairly fun. They're sort of like the first rifts that Rift introduced into the game, or dolmens that ESO has, where these things spawn out in the world. But they're pretty samey. I think that corruption breaches going forward, they could really iterate on those and create unique experiences inside of those different breaches. You've got a few different types now, but those types, each one plays exactly the same. So let's add some variety to some of the mechanics that you need to close these, or the things that happen inside these portals that you need to interact with, and mobs that you need to fight. I think going forward for the longevity of the game, I think there could be a lot of variety in corruption breaches, and I think that could be a lot of fun, much like Rift did in its later years. That's one of the things they did really well, is the rifts started getting fairly unique, and you could summon different types of rifts for different purposes. All sorts of awesome mechanics in that game that corruption portals could borrow from going forward. Along with that, I believe elite zones could be next level if they take more inspiration from the first one that I encountered, which was the pirate area, the elite pirate area in Monarch's Bluff. That is a fantastic Zerg zone. Just go in and just kill a bunch of stuff, loot some boxes. There's little mini baby bosses that spawn that might have a mechanic or something to interact with. But it's mostly by just going in, getting in a group, and just Zerging the crap out of the zone. There was a cave to explore with different levels, different paths, and there was an outside area. And that was a lot of fun, at least for a little while. It may not, be something I want to do forever, but it was a lot of fun when I went down there and grinded out some weapon levels and killed some things and got some fat loots. It was nice to just do that and be in just a group of random people and zerging it up. Unfortunately, when you get to some of the other elite zones, they're not set up to really be done that way. They're smaller areas. They're more open areas. You just kind of see everything from where you are. If you step foot on the island, everything on the entire island just aggroes to you because aggro radius is. All of the elite zones are not equal. I think more should take, more inspiration from that very first one in Monarch's Bluff. That was a lot of fun, and let's kind of buckle down on the elite zones. Could be great, Zerg, go in and just kill a bunch of stuff just to blow off some steam type PvE content that I think could be a really, really good time. Especially if you see things like people farming the boar exploit and stuff right now. That's not exciting, but people still like to do it. And finally, we'll end with the low-hanging fruit, I guess. Something that a lot of folks I know want, and a lot of folks would have a lot of fun with, and something that is probably coming in the future, but I would like to see it sooner rather than later, and that's battle arenas and raids. That's content. Battle arenas for PvP players. Structured content, maybe something like 10 versus 10. Something that's not like the full 50v50 war, or just, open world PvP zerging. Some folks would enjoy just a more structured PvP type atmosphere, and you can even set it up to where the winner of of that arena, wherever that arena is located, the winner of that match gets a little bit of territory influence for their faction. Make it still tie in to the territory control aspect of the game, because that is the core of the game here. Even in PvE, that's what we're doing a lot, is affecting upgrades for the territories and protecting it from the PvE invasions. On the PvE side, I would like to see raids, and that does kind of go against what I had initially said on the Always Online podcast a couple of weeks ago. I know I said that I would rather see smaller strike missions, kind of like Guild Wars 2. I would just like to see some form of structured, 10-player PvE content. The dungeons are pretty nice. It's nice to get in there in a group, but to be able to get 10 folks together and really have to work on, concentrate, no boss fights, and really have something to work towards and progress in. That would be really awesome, and something a little different than the full huge invasion that we have, or the small 5-player dungeons. Something in the middle, a nice 10-player raid that we can jump in. Let's not grind a million trash mobs. That's why I was saying, you know, the smaller strikes. But raids, man, I get it. Like, I want it. Real talk. Every game should be different. And I'm a big fan of, I don't think this game should do everything that every other MMO does, because it does set itself apart in a lot of ways. But I want raids, man, like real talk, just like a lot of other folks. I want some raid content, some structured PvE, bigger groups in New World. And that's going to do it for my list of 10 things I would like to see New World improve or add as soon as possible. Now, I would like to say, because the internet is what it is, that myself and a lot of us at MMO Bomb are big fans of Josh Strifehaze, who I have been imitating throughout this video. It's not intended as anything harsh or insulting. It's just having a bit of fun with his gimmick and his popularity, because we enjoy his content quite a bit. So just so the internet doesn't take things out of context, this was just all in fun. So now we say goodbye. Thank you so much for checking out this video. I had a lot of fun coming up with the idea and making this video and moving my board games out of the other room to set them up behind me, because that was a thing I had to do in order to create the, oh, there's nerd stuff behind me. I got to do something about my background, man. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you haven't already subscribed to the channel, always head over to mmobomb.com to check out all the news and information you need to know about multiplayer games. We're the experts. We're going to let you know what's up. Thank you so much. MMO Thoughts. This is not a first look. It's done. I'm out. Pinkies up, Josh. Pinkies up.